Hey, 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 good evening. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Dr. Lisa. Hello, your host for Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. If you have any questions, you certainly can ask me. You can ask me live on air on Podbean, or you can ask me if you are connecting with me on social media. I'm live on at Kids Can See Ghost Can You, which is on Instagram. I am also live on Facebook today, and I am live on my private Instagram page. You guys can call into Podbean. I will let you in if you have questions or comments and your own experiences if you want to join. I can be reached at 765-205-1959. If you want to give me a call. Some questions come in via my email address, and that is kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com. So I'm all over social media. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'm easy for you guys to reach me. If you just want to send a message on Facebook or Instagram, you can do that as well. So we last week were tying up. Let's see. I believe this is actually. I've been messing up my numbering on my Podbean site, and actually, I believe we're on volume 42, but I called it 40 today because last week was 39. So we are actually ahead of schedule as far as I'm concerned. So let's just jump right into something that I've been writing about lately. Um, yeah, guys, I'm experiencing nebulous children or children who can see ghosts again. I did not expect for this to happen, not at all. You never know why you're being put into situations when they happen, but what has been happening to me lately, I haven't written the details on my blog, but I've given you a snapshot of them because I can't write all the details right now. But in a couple of weeks, I'm actually going to give you more detail on the podcast about the experiences that I'm having now. And some of them are kind of shocking. And you'll understand when we get to that podcast. So yeah, I did not expect, I should have expected it probably, but I didn't expect to see any more nebulous kids and colleagues. That's a new one. I don't really talk about my colleagues who can see ghosts, but guess what? Now I have a couple of them. So I already told them I'm going to write your stories on my blog. And guess what? None of them have rejected that at all. So TBA on that one, the colleagues who can see ghosts. So last week we were talking about a question that I posed to the public about if you guys know of any kids who can see ghosts. And I'm telling you, you guys came through. There are thousands of people who have this ability. And so what I decided to do for this blog is to compile some of them that have been the most popular back when I wrote it, which was last year. And so we're down to one more. And at the time that I wrote this blog, this person's comment was the most popular at the time. It had 16.4 thousand views. And I have not looked at how many it has now, but that page has probably probably close to 70,000 views at this point or more. So I can't imagine how many views this one has. But back then it was 16.4, and it was the most popular one response. The other thing that I want to share with you is that based upon what this person wrote, other people started to write about their experiences when their relatives have passed away. So that was like a response that generated other responses. So it's pretty interesting. And this story is also a story that I hear quite often from all of you that do write into me about it or call me and talk to me about it. That some of you have questions about, your relatives that have passed on, but also some of you have had experiences with seeing them in dreams and stuff like that. And I can relate to that because I've had dreams about deceased relatives as well. This one is a bit different, and as some of them are very different. This person is discussing the fact that they can actually see ghosts. And this is what it says if you have not looked at the blog. Yes, I do. I've been seeing them since my grandpa died when I was 5 years old. And so remember, one of the things that I share with you guys is that a lot of the parents recall being able to see ghosts just like this person from a very young age. And so this person said, I saw him standing in our driveway looking at me. So I asked him some questions like, what are you doing here? But he just stared at me. So I went in the house to tell my mom that he was just standing there outside. But when she looked out the window, he was gone. Just then, the phone rang. So mom told me to go back outside. But when I did, he was still there. So I asked him again what he's doing, but got no reply again. So back in the house, I saw mom was crying. I asked her what's wrong with her. She said my grandpa is gone, but I still saw him outside. So we both went out to look, but this time he was really gone. I didn't know he died though, or even what mom was talking about either. The next time I saw him looking alive again was at his funeral. He looked real to me, but nobody else saw him. This time he smiled at me, so I asked him what he's doing at this place because I knew it wasn't home. He smiled really big, then nodded his head at me. That's when mom put her arm around me really tight to her. So I knew that meant to shut up. She did that a lot without saying a word because I understood what it meant. That was the first time I saw a ghost that looked as real as you and me. I just didn't know it then. The thing is, though, after all this time, I can still see him just like he never left, and maybe he never did. He was gone for a while, but now he's back again. We communicate telepathically. He likes car rides. It's kind of sweet, right? Everybody who has a grandpa in their lives that they love, um, or they used to love, that just kind of warms their heart. This is a story that I like too, not just because it made me smile because it's kind of sweet, but it is a true reflection of what it's like to be able to see ghosts for these individuals. And so some of the things in this comment here reminded me of different things that kids who can see ghosts would tell me. For example, I'll give you a really good example. Talking to them. What are you doing here? Why are you here? Especially when they can see what they think are deceased relatives. That's a common question. And if I actually know someone personal who I just wrote about this in my blog last week, who could see deceased relatives. And one of the common questions that this person asked them when they show themselves to this person is, what do you want and why are you here? Because they don't understand why that person is presenting themselves to me. And so the other thing that I talk about is that these kids can see ghosts, but remember, I've said over and over again, when their parents show themselves, they disappear. Do you guys kind of remember that? Yeah, because that's what I say. When the adults come around, these things sometimes go away. Now, was that truly her grandpa? She believes it, and that's all we need to hear is that she believes it. And that's kind of what you have to do with these kids as well. You don't want to discount their feelings. You want to understand what they're saying and make them believe that you believe in them, even if you do not, because it's really important. When this person was 5 years old, it sounds like she tried to tell her mom that something was outside and it was grandpa and why is he out there. But of course, mom was just, grieving herself. And so she really couldn't pay attention. But one of the other things that I hear about are funerals. Oh my gosh, I had one kid describe a funeral to me as um, the ghosts that she's seen at funerals. If it was of the deceased person, they were very happy that there was a funeral. That's funny to me. And it was, if you can imagine a funeral with a casket out front and the deceased person's spirit is like around the casket, sitting on it, looking at everybody else, just kind of chilling around like a human, but it's actually a ghost. And this kid said to me, and those of us who can see ghosts can see it. And the person is just, the ghost is just kind of looking around like, this is cool that all these people are here to grieve me. And so that's why when she was at the funeral, she could actually see her grandfather, because that's what kids tell me. Mind you, keep in mind, I don't see ghosts. All of this information comes directly from the kids. And so this is an adult person telling you, hey, when I was at the funeral when I was a kid, I saw my grandpa there, and nobody else saw him but me, and he smiled at me. So I hear about that as well. So I thought this was a very interesting comment from this person on a lot of levels. The kids also tell me that sometimes the ghosts look very real, as this person said. Excuse me. And sometimes when they pass away, I've heard from several kids that they look like they did, when they passed away. Just sometimes dress differently or something like that. So these kids tell me a lot. And I thought, you know what? If kids can tell me these things, I bet there are some adults who can tell me as well. And so that's why I posted this question on Quora. And since that time, okay, there are other responses to this question. So actually, I was thinking about this last week, and I said it's probably time for me to do another blog with the same topic and write some of your responses on my blog. So I may do that, because there are a lot of other experiences that I have to talk about from your perspective. And so I want to do that. So we have just finished that blog. So I think we should go into the next one, which is going to be pretty interesting to some of you who know me personally. This is blog 31. And blog 31 is called The Truth Divided: When Children Lied About Seeing Ghosts. Well, we're going to talk about that, because there are some children who did lie about it. They did. Now, let me tell you why I called this The Truth Divided. I've been waiting to do this. Some of you already know the story, but I'm going to tell you. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that blog, this is what I said, if you have not read it. I created the title. I did. The Truth Divided. Several years ago. I was not credited for the development of that title, and it was stolen from me for a periodical. Shame, isn't it? It is. To be specific, the person took full credit for the title and published the periodical. Now, this was a gift that was bestowed upon me, and I've never told this story publicly, but I'm going to tell it now because I don't care. One day I was writing a book and I didn't have a title to the book. And then as I prayed about the title, because I thought this would be a really, really good book that was going to come out, I told the person that the book was going to be about that God placed on my heart to call it The Truth Divided. And this person said, "That's a great title. It's really good. I like it." So I titled it The Truth Divided. This person went on to publish it without me. It is not of the caliber that I was going to publish it, but the person published it and called it The Truth Divided. And the person lied and said they created the name. That is not true. And at the end of this blog, I said, you see how dark angels can be manipulative? They make adults lie to kids. So, to that person, the truth shall set you free. Because that was a lie. Okay? Now, when I go back up, I thought about it. I said, sometimes you get divided when it comes to these kids because you always want to believe them when you work with them. But there are times when you have to know when kids fabricate stories to you. So I thought, there's a time when I'm also divided with these kids because I have such compassion for them and I want to believe what they tell me. But then, guess what? They lie. So here's what I started to do, okay, was to figure out when they were lying about seeing ghosts. And it's really easy. And I'm going to tell you how I did it. So remember, I told you guys that I don't ask for information about seeing ghosts. Never have had, never did back in the past, and I don't do it now. Typically, I told you it comes up at random. Once they feel as if they can tell me just out of the blue, you know what? I'll give you an example. I was sitting with a parent recently who said, out of the blue, and we were talking about something different, both my kids see ghosts. I'm being guarded with what I say. My kids see ghosts. And I just sat there and I think my heart dropped. So that's how it came up. And I said, "Oh." And there was a story behind that, a short story. And I just sat back and I thought, "Oh boy, here we go. This is great. This is great for, my supporters, my listeners, and my blog, but I wish they could all hear some of this stuff because this is how it happens to me." And so I just kind of say, "Really?" And then this mom goes, "Well, yeah," and told me about another kid in her life. And I was thinking to myself, okay, at some point, I got to write up their story, but now is not the time to do that. But that's an example of how it kind of happens to me. So seeing the kids for something totally different, and then bam, that comes up. So traditionally, that would have been a segue for me to kind of ask more questions about it, but because other people were in the room, so mind you, there are witnesses, I didn't do that to this parent. If I ever have the opportunity, I will, because it's truly fascinating some of the stuff that was said to me that day. And so when these parents and kids tell you these things, it's because they trust you. They can't go into the world and tell everybody, "Hey, my kids see ghosts," because the world can be cruel. You guys know that, and they don't always accept this kind of stuff. So, go back to the past. As I grew up in psychology, I started to understand that this was going to keep happening to me. And if you are in, the field of social science, this is going to happen to you. Well, I thought I was taking a break from, working with these kids. And here it is again. So this is what I mean to all of you who are in the field. You will come across this. Okay. So now someone who was in the room with me can finally say, this person is in social sciences too, and this person can finally say, yeah, I heard that, and now I have that experience of working with a kid or hearing about kids that see ghosts. So yeah, TBA on that one. All right, so determining whether a child was truthful or not became easy for me over the years, and it became easy because I hear these stories. I heard them, and now I'm hearing them again. I heard these stories all the time. So when you hear these stories all the time, what started to happen is that I developed a method for testing the kids out. So, for example, recently means within the last 3 weeks, somebody said to me, I can see ghosts. And I said, really? And this person started looking behind me, which is always a key for me when they start looking behind me. And so, and I don't give away everything on this podcast or blog because I want this stuff to stay with me so that I'll know how to test them. But I will tell you this because I've said it before. This person said, there are 3 angels behind you. And at first I thought 3. I don't tell anybody. I told you guys this last week about the 3rd one. Well, this person knew a story about the 3rd one that I never mentioned on my blog or on my podcast that I heard from kids multiple times many years ago. So I keep certain stuff and I don't reveal it. And this is how I start to develop a way to test this stuff out. So when this person started talking about the 3rd one, I just looked and said to myself, this person can actually see ghosts, right? So then I said, well, what do they look like? Because there are 3, but there are several from what I've heard from kids and parents, but I never talk about the 3rd one. And so I said, for example, what do they look like? Well, they glow behind you, and there's one who's right on you. Every time you move your head, she moves her head too. So that's an example. Well, this person knew it was a female. Stuff like that. So when it happens multiple times, and it keeps happening, and mind you, this has been happening for years, I learned that no matter what nebulous parent or nebulous child interacts with me, they can always see an angel around me, and they give certain characteristics. So, for example, if they said that, one of the angels was short, I would go, no, that's not what a bunch of kids have told me. Or if they say, for example, the kid, the one of them is blonde, for example, I would go, that's not what kids have told me. Because mind you, it's several kids, not just 1 or 2. So I kind of built my the way that I tested the kids up to determine if they were lying to me from that. There was there was also psychiatric symptoms too. For example, all of the little kids who can see ghosts, and I'm talking about the little ones, they will always be afraid of the dark no matter where they go. Now that can also be a symptom of them just being little kids, but it's different because they would say they see something in the dark. So there were just other things, and so it was really easy to do. One of the other ways is that the kids would tell me things that were said by certain things around me, and it was always consistent, And even the parents would say it. So again, there were certain things they would say. There was also actions they would take. And then there was the identification of certain things. And one of the most interesting things that I think, because we can't deny a kid's imagination, right? Kids have imagination. Excuse me. But one of the most fascinating things to me was that these kids would always talk about dark angels and would describe demons. Remember, little kids would call them dark angels to me, and they would describe them the same way. Now, if I encountered a kid who couldn't describe them that way, or said there was no such thing, or yeah, I can see ghosts, they look like sheets, for example, or they have stories that don't match up with, tens of hundreds of other kids that have been around me over the years, then I would kind of get skeptical about whether they really had disability or not. Okay, because I'm always realistic too about, you know not just the kids imagination, but that sometimes we all make stuff up. Okay. And so that's what I would do to try to discern whether they lie. Now, when you go back in the blog and you look, you are aware of some of what I just said, because child A, B, and C, all of those children has had the same stories. If you go back and read them, they all talked about, especially child B, talked about them in more detail. The angels around me. Child A, child B, C, D, E, F, G, all of them that I've written about, all talk about dark angels in the same way. The other thing that I didn't tell you a few minutes ago is that these kids would see, if I was in one building, for example, building 2, all of these kids would see dark angels in the same place. They would all also see the little spirit boy. When a child would come around me and wouldn't see those things, I would get skeptical. I may have never told those kids that I was skeptical that they couldn't see ghosts, but you and I probably know that they didn't. And that's okay. I still helped them. But some of them did lie about it. And that was my method, because there were certain trigger words that the kids would say. And so those trigger words were twofold. On one hand, you have trigger words for mental health, suicide, for example, wanting to hurt myself, wanting to hurt other people hurting me. So there were certain trigger words that would allude to, more mental health impairments. But there were also trigger words for nebulous children, such as, I only sleep with the lights on. I don't go in the closets. My mother has to be there. My father has to be around. I see this in the corner. My grandfather came back to see me. You have an angel in the tree, Dr. Lisa. There were a lot of different trigger words for me when it came down to, working with nebulous children, and they were consistent. I wish I could test this stuff and put a full research study out about it, because there are certain symptoms that these children have. Children that lie couldn't give me any details either. If you haven't read my blog, if you read it, I give a lot of details about what these children have told me, because they are very detailed, because they can see this stuff. For example, child B's parents, I told you guys they could see everything. What was fascinating to me about child B's mother, for example, was that she had the ability to see ghosts, like, I don't know, I'll just say it in layman's terms, like in the past. So when we would be outside, for example, child B's mother could see the details about what had happened on that land, and when a child was hurt on that land. And so when I would go and fact check all that stuff, it would check out correctly. because it's all in the news, even from, a long time ago. So it felt like, and it still does, that because these kids and parents can see everything, that's what I describe it as, they can see everything, that they could give me elaborate details. The angel that follows me around, I mean, thank God for her. She's behind me now. I mean, thank you, honey, for protecting me. Because remember, the kids tell me that she's always around me. They describe her as being very tall, 7 feet or more. That she's very pretty and been with me for since I was born. They told me. She, I don't know what kind of angel. I don't remember what kind of angel they said, but she guards me. And they said everybody has an angel that guards them. So no matter where you go, it's like right on you. And she glows, and she's of God, obviously, because I pray all those dark spirits away. I don't deal with demons at all. So she is of God, and she intercedes for me when I pray on behalf. She intercedes with God on my behalf when I pray. So they describe her as glowing white, and she knows stories about me. And actually, if you want more detail, she tells these kids little stuff about me to make me believe that they are actually talking to her. Kids who lie cannot do that. You see how detailed this gets? It gets really detailed from me. And it has gotten detailed from me. And it continues to be, because somebody recently told me about a kid that they think is possessed, that at some point I know I'm going to deal with. Do you see how detailed it gets? So for me, that's huge. And when kids lie to me, they didn't have the ability to tell me, all of the details. Another detail is that the angel in the tree is actually male. Male, glows white, rides on my car when I drive, is sends. Here's a detail. I don't even know if I wrote this in the blog. The kids tell me that this angel sends animals around to check on me because he can't come into my house. A kid who can't see ghosts won't tell me that. All of these kids said that. And the reason that came up is because I had 2 dogs who I loved who have since passed on. And the one that died in 2019, you have one animal that's your baby. She was my baby, and I miss her. And when she died, I took it hard. But everywhere I would go, this dog was on me. And I asked one of the kids, because I just had a feeling. And before I can ask, this kid said he wants to say yes to you, that he sends the dog to you. Stuff like that. Why can't he come into my house? Because he guards me outside, according to the kids. He does not come into my house. There's my angel in the house. So, from my understanding, and mind you, I can't see, but from my understanding of what all of these kids have told me, is that she, the female, that's one over 7 feet tall or something like that, she's guarding me all the time in the house. And then the one they call in the tree, obviously it's because he used to perch himself on the tree when I would work with the kids, and he would make the tree move, and the kids would giggle when they were working with me. And so he guards me right there outside. Yeah. And then the third one that I don't talk about is because I don't feel like I know a lot about it from the kids. Maybe some older kids, now that I'm working with older kids, they will eventually tell me. But the third one would stand guard over me on on the top of a building. And so I guess, and I'm not Jesus here, but I guess, God, if you pray for protection, he posts his angels just around you. So like angel in the tree rides on my car, from my understanding, when I'm at home. I mean, when I'm like riding around in my car. And then someone else had told me a couple of years ago that I actually had a lot of angels around me, but they're outside, like, I guess. So, does that answer your question? I hope so. So, he's just not allowed. Maybe God just doesn't allow him to come in the house because that's her job. I wish there were some pastors on the air who can answer that in more detail because I always thought that's interesting. But you see how those kind of details are what these kids told me. I would never ever know this without those kids. Kids who would lie to me were not that detailed, and they couldn't be that detailed. Not at all. Because obviously they don't see this stuff. So from child A on, child A is the one who taught me about dark angels. And then the rest of the kids would see different dark angels. There was here's another example for you. There was a dark angel that would stand on a building close to when I was in building number 2. And all of the kids that can actually see ghosts would walk down the stairs and they would look out the window and see that dark angel, and they would describe that dark angel to a T. So that one was male, looks like he had on a black suit, had black wings, and they said all of God's angels glow. They're angelic, they glow. This was a demon, and it was dark, but it looked like it wasn't scary to the kids. It just was standing up, like if you can see my hands, on the building with its wings spread out, and had dark wings. So that's what the kids told me about that one. And so the kids that I worked with, who could see ghosts, always saw that one, and they saw the little spirit boy, but they also saw that demon in building 1, 2, 3. Or was it 4? Okay, 3. And they all knew that there were Catholic priests that stayed in the 4th building. So the details that I have like that were consistently coming from these kids over and over and over again. So when I encountered a kid who fabricated these stories, I had a lot of information to ask these kids to prove whether or not they were lying to me. But it wasn't my goal, but a lot of them, I knew they were lying about it. Now, why they would want to lie about seeing ghosts, I do not know. But they did. And they did not share, some of the same stories and characteristics and even symptoms of mental health that the kids did who could see ghosts. So remember, on the mental health side, I'm a psychologist, so the kids weren't coming to me because they can see ghosts. Remember that. They were coming to me because they had some symptoms of mental health, or their symptoms were interfering in their daily activities. So, for example, their grades, socializing, or some of them just seemed kind of weird to their parents because they were isolating themselves because they were so sad, or they may have, you know, thought that, their kids were on a spectrum because their behaviors were a bit different than other kids. So they were actually coming to me because of their mental health symptoms. Sometimes it just so happens that these kids would tell me they could see ghosts, or their parents would tell me, and that's how I would find out. And we would just sit and talk about it. Now, here's a flip side of the coin. When kids would lie to me about seeing ghosts, let's see, how do I want to put this? Trying to help them to gain some type of control over their gifts didn't work. Remember, if they couldn't see ghosts, then it makes sense that it wouldn't work, right? But what would work is still when these kids wanted to learn how I dealt with kids who can see ghosts. For example, when they wanted to learn different ways to pray and stuff like that, those things still seem to lift their spirits and help them. So there are people who write to me and say, well, I don't believe in God and I don't believe in prayer, and that's okay. This is not about your beliefs nor mine. This is about what works for me, what worked for me to help these kids, because these kids need help. Imagine if you saw ghosts all day and you were at school and you were at home. You wouldn't sleep either. What does lack of sleep do? Extreme lack of sleep causes symptoms of mental health. So if you had symptoms of mental health like some of these kids, you would try different tactics too. And so even with kids who would lie to me, sometimes I would still teach them these things and I would see positive results in them. And so, you know, when they, it's kind of like, this is a question that I get. My doctor wants to give my kids medication for ADHD despite them having ADHD. It is a trial dose of medicine. So I try to be honest with you all. That is my pet peeve with kids that have not been diagnosed with ADHD. If they don't have ADHD, would the medication work? That's a trick question. Ooh, I wish my students were listening. You don't know if it's working because they don't have ADHD. So either it's going to be like a sugar pill to them or it's going to give them a little bit of energy, right? And you can't tell if they really have ADHD and if the medication, you can't tell if the medication is working if they truly don't have ADHD. It works for kids that have inattentiveness, hyperactivity, or impulsivity, okay? So, same thing. If I'm teaching them how to control a gift they don't have, is it going to work? No, not for that gift, right? Not for the ability to see ghosts. But what it did do is give some of the kids some faith and a way of coping with their mental health ailments, most of the time without medication, mind you. So you have to give some kids some support. And if they really felt as if they could see ghosts, even if they couldn't prove it to me, who am I to judge, right? So whatever I taught the nebulous kids, I taught to the kids who I knew lied to me as well, so that it would help them. All righty. There's a couple of other things to talk about in this blog, but I'm going to pause on some of the other ones and talk about dark angels. Everybody likes to talk about dark angels. You guys listen to me, you know by now I don't like giving demons notoriety, but it's okay to talk about them and you shouldn't be afraid to, and I'm not. I just don't like talking about them all the time. But I dealt with a lot of kids. Matter of fact, one of the ones recently could see something where I was in a building and I didn't like it. So I'm dealing with something like this right now. When those kids would come and they would see dark angels, and these are nebulous kids, some of them enjoyed it. They were getting attention. Some of them posed as loving little kids with them. They were very manipulative towards some of these kids. And what I would see is an increase in mental health symptoms. Believe it or not, I did. So I went on a quest, especially, I think if you read the story earlier blogs about child A, I went on a quest to try with some of these kids to remove them from dark angels. So I would try to separate them from interacting with dark angels. So I tried to find a way to remove dark angels from these kids. And there were times when I had to get the parents involved because they go home. And a lot of the kids would say that these dark angels would follow them to testing, that's psych testing or therapy, and wait outside the door for them when they were with me. In the beginnings, before I understood this stuff, they were actually coming into the room. But we worked on that and I stopped that from happening. But then when they would get in the car, a lot of these kids would say they just get in the car and they just sit next to me. Yeah, dark angels sitting in the car. And then they would wait for them when they would get home and they would interact with them again. So I wasn't always successful. with separating kids from dark angels because of their tactics to influence children. And it's very tricky. I tried to do a technique called joining the family. That is a term that some of you in social sciences are familiar with. And I would try to do that to have a strong alliance or force with these families and with these kids to try to remove the dark angels because they were manipulating a lot of these kids. You know, a lot of these kids were fighting and they were, you know, doing other acts of violence because they wouldn't separate themselves from these dark angels. And listen, when you watch these movies, I am watching something now. Oh, there's a number one show on Netflix, Lock and Key. I've been watching Lock and Key because I wanted to see how the little boy is interacting, and I'm not going to give it away. You guys can watch it. Interacting with what he sees because I wanted to see how much of it mimicked the nebulous children that I've encountered. And lo and behold, let me give an example of what I'm talking about. When this little boy and also his siblings, because they're still kids, know there's a key around, they'll hear something like this. It's kind of like these spirits are talking to them, okay, so that they can find a key. That's what these kids tell me about dark angels, that they're constantly whispering at them to do stuff. Go and hit her, hit her, hit her, hit her. Do this, do that. Go rob a store. Go shoot someone. You know, but they would sometimes pose as friends to these kids. And so that is really strong. Now take that to a different level. Take it to the level of possibly a neglected kid who is lonely, who can see ghosts, who is interacting with who they think is just a friend and it's a dark angel, right? I've heard all of those stories. And so sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't because they're actually speaking to these kids without adults around. Do you think dark angels would talk to these kids when I was around? No, they didn't. Plus, they knew better, right? Because I would cleanse my office so they wouldn't come into my office. But when you are working with these kids, there's some unseen force who's also working with the kids, and you know, they're not necessarily, the kids aren't necessarily cooperating because they are being whispered. Sometimes these dark angels would tell the kids not to talk to me, and they would, and that I wasn't going to help the kids. And kids would tell me, they would say, they tell me that you aren't going to work with us well, or that you're not going to help us. And they say, I don't need you. Child A used to, you know, tell me that all the time. They say, I don't need you. I don't need you. That's what they told me. I don't need you. I don't need you. So that's kind of what I would face when kids, you know, would interact with dark angels. And it would make me wonder if some of the kids who actually would lie about seeing ghosts actually had dark angels around them. They just really couldn't see them because some of these kids were really acting out too. So it opened up my eyes to a whole nother world when working with kids and wondering if, you know, there's some things that interact with kids that a lot of us just don't see. And so sometimes I hear about kids that are being put on medication and you haven't really tried to do the least restrictive thing with them. So I hear about that kind of stuff. And so sometimes now, fast forward, of course, like 25 years, and I'm way older now. Sometimes I wonder if we actually missed the mark with kids, you know. Am I onto something with this stuff? You know, is it happening to me with these kids for a reason? And I guess we will find out the more that we talk about this stuff. So we're going to stop right there. I'm going to pose a question to all of you in the social sciences. I like little trivias, okay? If you are in social sciences, who pioneered joining the family? That's my question for you. And what branch of therapy is joining the family related to or categorized? And I'll give you a hint. This person is not a psychologist, and they recently passed away last year. And I'm a huge fan of this person, and I hope that he rests in peace. So if you had an answer to that, if you are in social sciences, you let me know. And then I will tell you the answers next week. So thank you guys so much for joining me. We will finish up this blog next week, and then we will go on to the next one, which is, I got to scroll back up. I forget what I write sometimes. You are very welcome. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Oh. October Ghost Stories is next. These are going to be good. Oh my God. And actually, I'm going to do this again this year in October because I have like a ton of these that are kind of scary. So next week, Blog 32 starts that series of October stories. So yeah, I'll see you all next week. Make sure you, if you have the opportunity, to read Blog 32, and we will go from there. All righty. You guys have a wonderful rest of the week.